Okay, welcome, Marjorie. Thank you for coming on the show. We're glad to have you here. This is all about the documentary that you executively produced, titled "Changing Your Mind." I have a few questions to ask you about it. I thought it was a great documentary, by the way.
Thank
So congratulations. You're welcome.
you.
But first, before we talk about the documentary or anything, can you tell me how you got into mind body medicine?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for having me. And it's so great to meet people that are like-minded and are interested in this kind of work, because it's really great to get the word out. I really think it can help a lot of people. So my own story is that my father suffered from chronic back pain for multiple decades and tried everything. He saw specialists all over the country, and basically everyone that he saw told him that he needed to get back surgery, and that it was a degenerative condition and that it was going to get increasingly worse. Until one day he had such a bad back spasm that he couldn't walk anymore. And so his friend had given him this book by Dr. Sarno, Healing Back Pain, and he didn't want to read it because he thought like, oh, it's another like how-to book. And I already am so like discouraged. I don't feel like being discouraged again by another thing that won't work for me.
Mhm.
But he had nothing to do because he was just laying there. So he read it, and just even through beginning to read the book, his symptoms started to resolve. So that was a big deal for our family, because our dad no longer had pain. So I had just been finishing undergrad, and at that time was just so intrigued that I thought people really need to learn about this, and there needs to be empirical research to support it. That way people don't think that it's kind of this like foo-foo thing, but realize that there's like a lot of science to support these kinds of cases. So I now am pursuing my doctorate at Wayne State, studying under Dr. Mark Lumley, who specializes in different types of psychological treatments for chronic pain and how they work.
Okay, wow. So you're actually under Mark Lumley. That's cool. I didn't know that.
Yes. You know him?
Great. I know of him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's cool. He's awesome.
he is.
I love him.
Congratulations. That's
Yeah.
an amazing place to be in. So
Yeah.
when this happened with your dad, how long that must have been recently then, right?
Well, so yeah, that was 4 years ago.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty recent.
I know. I
And
know.
was he not working?
He was still able to work, yeah, but he just had like these episodes where he couldn't go into the office because he was too much pain.
Okay. Did he tell you that he was doing this as he was doing it, or he only told you guys once he got out of pain?
Yeah, while he was reading the book, it was kind of funny. He was like, "This is like me." And he was like, "This book is so much like me." And it was like this crazy thing, and our family was like, "Really?" And then he like kept bringing it up like at random times. Like we'd be at dinner and he'd be like, "It's so this thing I read." Um, and so I think now there's not a ton of support for like a typical like back pain personality like Dr. Sarno suggested. But there is like this type of person that has these deep emotions that they're not processing. And so my dad really fit into that category. So
When you say there's not a lot of support for this back pain personality, are you speaking specifically for your dad or just for the field in general?
so I don't know if listeners are familiar with Dr. Sarno's book, but one of the things that he talks about is that people that tend to get this kind of pain are like perfectionistic
Right,
people.
the TMS personality.
Yes,
Right.
like very conscientious. And so I think that is true that those people have a heightened vulnerability to developing chronic pain. But there's also people who are like get angry super easily and get TMS, or are like really messy and don't care about being a perfectionist that get TMS. And so the idea is more like maybe your perfectionism and your like desire to be so caring toward other people is more about like an inability to really express yourself. And so there are people that are messy that have that same problem, or there are people that blow up at other people and get really angry at other people because they also have these like deep emotions that they aren't processing correctly.
Okay, so good, cool. I'm so glad that this came up because one thing that's happening in the research area,
Huh?
and as far as research goes, you're a part of it, but practitioners are a part of it. I'm a part of it because
Totally.
I work with people daily. I talk to people daily via
Totally.
email, DM, and also my own personal clients because right now I'm coaching people with TMS.
That's awesome.
Um, Thank you so much. But one thing that, as we continue to learn more and more, we're starting to see that not everything that Sarno said can always be taken literal 100% of the time. And it's also not correct 100% of the time for everybody with TMS. And so
Mhm.
when I asked you about the TMS personality, I don't want you to be scared to like disagree with anything that Sarno has said,
Yeah.
because really, like, we love Sarno, but Sarno would also want us to advance on what he's taught us,
Totally.
right?
Totally.
I know he would. I just know
Yeah.
that he would.
He
And
would.
so I'm not like a, I'm not like a, what is it? This is not the cult of Sarno. This is the
Yeah.
mind body field where
Yeah.
we can challenge each other's ideas and we can continue to build on what we already know. But I 100% agree with you. Not everybody who has the TMS has the TMS personality. That personality, however, is definitely prone to getting TMS. And I'm actually one of those people who has that personality.
Mhm.
Definitely perfectionistic,
Mhm.
definitely altruistic, like a
Yeah.
goody goody,
Yeah.
and that's been a lifelong thing for me. On the other hand, there are people who are very angry that lash out at others and they still have TMS. And
Mhm.
I've reconciled why that is. I think that there's two different drivers for TMS, which we can talk about later. And for
Mhm.
me, that's good. That's obsession and repression, and overexpression and underexpression. Meaning, somebody who represses can cause themselves TMS, and somebody whose their emotions are just constant fight or flight, and that can look like lashing out at others. That can look like being mad all the time. Those people get TMS too. It's chronic fight or flight, period. Whether that's caused by repression or overexpression.
Interesting. I like that. I like that theory. That makes sense to me.
Thank you. Yeah, it's taken me a while to finally like recognize why is it that this person's mad all the time. It can't just be repression. It just can't. Um,
Yeah.
so, well, I want to dive into that later on in the interview, but let's go ahead and talk about the documentary. I
Mhm.
did watch it. I thought it was fantastic. You guys had actually more doctors than I thought, like more people in the space than I thought together to do this documentary. How did you guys accomplish that?
Yeah, so it was kind of me and my dad's idea that we wanted to come up with like a really short, digestible thing that people could quickly watch in 10 minutes to kind of learn about this approach because my dad was like, I just needed to know the information, and it helped me immensely. And so then people from there can kind of find other resources. So we wanted to create something that was like really easy to watch and interesting and short. And so I had interned under Dr. Ira Rashbaum at NYU, who is Dr. Sarno's protege, and he I interviewed him. Dr. Mark Lumley, who's a psychologist who studies emotions and pain. He's my mentor, so I interviewed him, and then he works with a gentleman named Dr. Yoni Ashar, and he's done like some clinical trials on pain, and kind of works with like Alan Gordon and that group in Los Angeles, who are really influential and doing amazing things. So, so yeah, that's how we ended up like getting connected with all of them, and then Dr. Rashbaum reached out to some of his patients and asked if they would be interviewed for the doc. So
Wow, okay, wow. Um, so how did that happen with Ira Roshbaum?
so my dad saw him after my dad was read the book. He was like, I need to get an appointment with this guy to like make sure that this is true for me, kind of thing. Um, and then after that, I thought like, wow, that'd be so cool to intern with him. And NYU has a summer internship program, and so I emailed Dr. Rashbaum, and he said, sure, if you get accepted, you can work with me for a summer. So, or it wasn't a summer; it was probably like 4 weeks or something. Um, and so I just saw his patients with him for a summer before I knew anything about TMS and knew anything about psychology. Um,
Wow.
that was real. That was a great privilege, and he's amazing. And we still work on some things together now. Yeah.
So like in the span of just a few years, you've been thrown into this and you're already working with somebody who used to directly work with Sarno. That's pretty cool.
I'm trying.
That's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Hmm.
Okay. So yeah, it came out great. Now Vince Vaughn, that's somebody who surprised me too. When I saw Vince Vaughn in the documentary, I was like, how the heck did this happen?
Yeah, so he was one of Dr. Rashbaum's patients. And so
Oh, okay.
yeah, so Dr. Rashbaum reached out to him and said, like, could we interview you for this? And so he so nicely offered to, and he was like just really great and really, of course, he's like so great on television and is able to articulate himself so well. And so I thought his interview was really great, and I'm so appreciative to him for helping because I think it kind of speaks to the fact like it doesn't matter what resources you have. If you don't treat it with the mind, you're not going to treat it. And so you could have like access to the best doctors in the world and the best healthcare in the world. And if you're not dealing with these underlying emotions, you will have pain.
Absolutely. I know for myself personally, I saw some of the best doctors in the country. I flew out of state.
Mm,
Um, I had no answers still.
mhm.
Um, and it also speaks for the fact that is it, money doesn't matter when it comes to your doctor knowing about this or not. You
Yeah.
can, there can be some very prominent, successful doctors that still don't know about TMS or they reject the theory, which also is very prevalent.
Mhm.
So if you're rich or whatever, your doctor can still not know about TMS and the best doctor that money can pay for.
I know. So tell me a little bit about your story. How did you like find out about this treatment and how long were you dealing with chronic pain?
Yeah, so I dealt with chronic pain myself. Chronically, I've always had TMS issues that would come and go, but when it became chronic and life altering, that was going into 2018. And then
Okay.
from 2018 to 2020 was when it was severe. And then towards the end of 2020, I found out about Dr. Sarno. I actually was on a Harvard forum of Harvard students. um, Through crazy like deductive logic, I had determined that my pain was behaving like RSI,
Mm,
even though it was actually what I was dealing with primarily at the time was CPPS. But the
mm,
symptoms matched RSI very closely. Like it would come and go. I was already questioning like the basis for my pain because it just didn't make sense. And I used to tell myself all the time, it's like this thing has a mind of its own.
mm.
Well, it actually did. It was my mind. Um, but I used to always tell myself that anyway. So I Google how to cure RSI. I come across a forum of Harvard students that are talking about healing back pain, the book by Dr. Sarno.
Okay.
Read that one like I inhaled it because I was desperate and terrified that I was going to be in pain forever. And then I moved on to Divided Mind,
Oh yeah.
and I really mastered that book. Read it over and over until I understood TMS theory forward and backwards. And sure enough, it was the only thing that touched my pain. But then after I found out about this, the thing that kind of scared me was that nobody knows about this. Like I'm really the only one in my immediate and extended circle that knows about TMS. Now,
Same.
there's a lot of people in the world that I notice, but we're just scattered everywhere.
Hmm.
So if I didn't do that research myself, nobody would. So any kind of effort to spread the word and just get general awareness for, I'm all for that because I wish that there was that somebody for me, but there
Totally.
wasn't. It was me. If I didn't, like, I still believe to this day that if I didn't do that research, nobody would have told me because still to this day, nobody in that I know knows about this. I'm the only one, and I'm the one that's spreading that information.
That must have been so crazy for you to have this freedom from pain.
Oh, it was amazing. However, to let you know and to let my viewers know as well, something that I discovered is I kind of thought life after TMS was going to be perfect. But I still actually deal with
Yeah.
some anxiety. I still deal with, I'm dealing with the emotions now. So now the pain is no
Mhm.
longer distracting me and I have to deal with those emotions. And
Totally.
um, I learn every time like this is exactly when I'm struggling with anxiety, for example, like this is what my brain was shielding me from. This is
Yeah,
what my brain was protecting me from. And now I'm feeling it. I'm like, dang, this is tough too.
I
You know,
know.
and Sarno, Sarno talked about, have you read The Divided Mind by
Yes.
chance?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a part in that book where he talks about him going on vacation with his wife, and he has horrible reflex the whole time. They can't figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
He comes back and he realized he never wanted to go on that vacation. He was people pleasing for his wife, and
Yeah.
that's what it was. And he says, you know, I always would say that if patients had the choice, they would choose the emotions instead of the pain. This time, I realized maybe the pain was better. How awful of me to think that I didn't want to be on that vacation with my wife.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
I think that's so interesting. And I think that's something that, like, specifically with working in therapy with patients, it's kind of like everything is serving a purpose. And so, how maladaptive are the symptoms? Like, how much interference are they having with your life? And if it's something that you can manage for 10 days while on vacation and you can like enjoy the vacation with your wife, but you have gastric reflux, who cares? You know what I mean? It's okay when you get back, but versus like getting into this whole deep thing with her about all these issues or whatever. But if you have like chronic back pain or chronic reflux or these things that are really debilitating, usually we can find ways to manage our emotions better too.
absolutely, yeah. The word, obviously, the worse the pain, you're like, no, there's no emotion worse than this,
Oh,
which I've experienced that as well. So,
mhm.
but then I've also experienced times where I can see why your brain decides to make this decision for you to
Yes.
give you the pain because sometimes, not all the time. So people watching this don't. I'm saying this as a person who's been in through the thick of it and out of it, and I will say that sometimes I can see like, wow, I can actually see how a mild like foot pain, for example, would be better than this feeling. Is that's so intense. The
Mhm.
emotions can be so intense, and they can be equally as painful
Mhm.
as physical pain sometimes. And I know some of the research is starting to come out that is saying that it's actually processed by our brain very similarly. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, same region of the brain. We process emotions and we process physical pain. So I think a lot of times those circuits can get jumbled. And also with kind of one thing that we talk about a little bit in the documentary is sort of how what they think are kind of the mechanism underlying all of this is that we are afraid of certain emotions. And so our body uses pain as like a useful tool to show danger. Like you don't want to put your hand on a hot stove, you get pain. That way your brain learns and your body learns this is a dangerous thing to interact with. And so, interestingly, depending on how we grew up or whatever happened in our life, we have like these repressed memories, or maybe we were taught that it wasn't okay to be angry, or we were taught that it was really dangerous to be happy because something really sad might
Oof,
happen right away again.
it's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so your brain learns like these emotions are really dangerous. And the more that we can kind of, and so therefore it senses a threat. And so it gives this pain response, like, don't go there, don't put your hand on the hot stove kind of idea. So one thing that Mark is trying to develop in his therapies is helping people kind of get desensitized to emotions so that like more and more you become comfortable with anxiety or more and more you become comfortable with rage and realize like it's normal I would feel angry, it's normal I would feel sad, it's normal I would feel anxious, and I don't need to be, my body doesn't need to be afraid, and over time hopefully the body gets more used to the emotions so they
And
can.
I love that. And I love that. I saw you post a reel about that, and I thought it was right on the money. And I love that in the documentary, you guys do a very good job of keeping it simple and clear what TMS theory is, which is substituting a substitute for physical emotions. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, a substitute of physical symptoms for
yeah,
emotions.
yeah.
You guys did that perfectly. And that line that the line that Vince Vaughn uses is a line I often use for my own brain. Like, give me the emotions, don't give me the physical pain. Like, I can handle the emotions. I can handle it. Like, there's no need to be afraid, which I love because, yeah, for most people, there is that is the main cause of their pain, is they're repressing, and their brain perceives fight or flight emotions as a threat, which only creates more fight or flight emotions. And that desensitize, what you're describing is desensitization, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we can desensitize to anything.
I
You
know.
know, it's crazy. Like, if you look at people who have jobs like EMTs or like trauma specialists in emergency rooms, like they see these horrible things every day. People with all kinds of crazy wounds, people in crisis situations, and they're able to have these jobs. Not everyone, because we know burnout is prevalent in
Yeah.
those fields, but some people are actually able to desensitize
Uh-huh.
and stay in the field. The ones that do survive are usually those, in my opinion, that are able to desensitize.
Yeah, I know. So hopefully we can get ourselves to be more and more comfortable with our deep emotions because the more comfortable we can to these like internal senses of trauma or internal wounds, kind of to use the EMT example, the more freedom we'll have. You know, I feel like in my own life, just being afraid of things makes you feel controlled by that thing. And so once I can kind of realize like I don't need to be afraid of being angry, um, it gives you so much more freedom. You're not like manipulated by avoiding this thing.
Right, you get to actually look at it and just decide what you want to do with it.
Right. Yeah. I know.
Right. Well, yeah, we're getting to some deep stuff here. As far as your research goes, what are you looking to do that as a career, or is that just like a short-term thing while you're doing your PhD?
Yeah. So I'm hoping that once I'm done, I can both continue with research and treat patients. So I'm hoping that that can be the ultimate goal that you can kind of like, as I'm researching, I'm learning. And then as I see patients, that will inform my research. And I just think we need more and more studies about this. But I also just love working with people. So you probably get that doing your coaching, that like it's really inspiring to help people and to see people improve both psychologically and physically. Um, so yeah, we should. I will see. I was thinking like you should see if you can take Dr. Lumley's next like training on his therapy type 2. I think he offers them like every other year or something. He just started
Oh,
it.
yeah, I'm more than open to that. So
Yeah.
please contact me
Yeah.
when those details come out. Yeah, and that's how we're gonna learn. Studies are very expensive. They are time consuming,
Mm-hmm.
and but we still have to do them. But another thing is you can't do really like double blind, placebo, exact specific studies because you can't measure the things that we're studying in a lab. But
Yeah.
my point is that lots of learning takes place in these conversations between practitioners. So that's extremely important because now you're not just learning from your own clients, you're actually learning from everybody's clients.
That's so true. And from this other person with different experiences or a different perspective or like, you know, um, has their own skill set and approach. But it actually is interesting to see how people have started to run like randomized trials where they put people in like
Right.
they just get back surgery or they just go to PT or they get this treatment or they get like mindfulness treatment and to track like does actually expressing your emotions help reduce pain when we're really measuring it, and it seems like it does.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've seen some of the more popular studies that have came out recently.
But it's so tricky.
Um, it is because like I said, you can't make, and then we know that actually belief even impacts
Mm-hmm.
how fast or if or to the degree that people get better from TMS. You can't measure that either. You can't measure any unconscious resistance that's coming up during treatment.
I know.
So explaining why, for example, like take the Boulder back pain study, if you know that one. Like not everybody found relief. So
Mm-hmm.
like we can't say why because we can't measure exactly what it was. We don't know what's going on in their head
No.
exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
I know it is so tricky, and they actually have run similar trials on like different populations, and they've seen that in Boulder it like worked better than in other groups of people, and so they were wondering if it has something to do.
Cultural influence.
Yeah, like people that live in
Yeah.
Colorado tend to be more like mind body aware, and, like they
Yeah.
love like hiking and all this kind of stuff, like holistic treatments, and so trying to find ways to adapt TMS type treatment for all people. That way it's not like this thing that you have to be this certain type of person to receive it kind of thing.
All right. Absolutely. Yeah. And also, I know I seem to recognize that people who are more spiritual, although these people tend to oftentimes be susceptible to TMS, they also tend to get better quicker.
Yes, interesting.
Yeah, so there are definitely certain things that can predispose somebody to kind of just taking this knowledge and accepting it quicker than others who won't, or even if they do accept it, implementing that knowledge is a whole other thing. I mean, it's taken me so long. It took me 6 months just to drop the fear that my pain was in TMS. And then it took a more time to start feeling my emotions and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So for everyone, it's going to be different. Now, I want to ask you, as a researcher, as somebody who's like you're in this thing, you're in this world,
Mhm.
you're studying with like some of the best doctors in the field. Are you how much are you like a Sarno purist, quote unquote, and how much are you like? There's definitely more to know, and maybe some things that we thought were true are not true.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think it's kind of in line with what you were saying before. I think that Dr. Sarno was such a forerunner and someone who was on the edge of scientific knowledge and really wanted to push the boundaries. And so I think what you were saying is that he would want that for all of us. You know, what he was, the theories he was developing was in the 1980s and 1990s when people were just starting, people weren't even paying attention to this. And since that time, we've had a lot of research and a lot of people come through and kind of like tweak his theories, maybe just like kind of into like models that are more holistic and fit more. And so I think that that's kind of where I stand. I respect him so much and think that almost everything he said has been found to be true. But we're obviously like developing things as science should.
Absolutely. One thing that I've noticed about the Sarno, and the more I get familiar with it, is that even there were some things he mentioned in his books, but they weren't worded very well. Like, and I talked about repression being a cause of TMS, but I also, as we talked about earlier, think that there's also just chronic fight or flight. There's studies with people who are depressed and also have back pain at the same time. So they're not like repressing their depression, like they are chronically depressed. They are chronically ruminating on their life's problems, not repressing, and yet they still have back pain. But what I realized was that Sarno touched on this in the books. Just the way that they're worded makes it seem like if you have pain, you're repressing, and that's just not the case. And what I find with the patients that stick to that belief is they're digging, and for something they're repressing when there's nothing. They actually need to just stop and regulate themselves and get to a place of safety and to actually stop ruminating on the problems they already have been like for years. And if it's one thing that amazes me, it's the brain and body's ability to actually stick to one emotion and just like stick to it infinitely. Infinitely. A person can have one circumstance that makes them angry and they can hold on to that anger from that one circumstance literally until they die.
Hmm. Yeah, an interesting thing too is that I think what you're saying is true. Like I was kind of talking about this in one of the trainings that I went to about how like sometimes trying so hard to find the root cause of why you're experiencing pain can almost activate the nervous system more. And but on the flip side, there's some research that supports the idea that like depression and anxiety, like these kind of negative thoughts are also like a coping mechanism to avoid like a deeper seated sadness or anger, or worry that's like very profound that our brain is trying to keep us away from thinking about. So sometimes with those patients, I do wonder, I'm like, is there something even beneath these other sadness, this other sources of sadness that you're discussing, something like very core? So,
Okay, right. So and this is where, like I said, the Sarno didn't really do a great job of like reconciling all of this. Like he got to a point where he realized it's happening, and but reconciling it is a bit tricky and nuanced. But I absolutely agree with you.
mhm,
Oftentimes, I do agree most of the time that rumination and stuff like that is protecting you. I actually think just most of the time it's just protecting you from the feeling.
mm,
So that rumination that's keeping the feeling alive is protecting you from the feeling. So your brain's trying to escape this feeling by it thinks ruminating is going to help. We know that it doesn't. We know catastrophization doesn't help. We know that when you ruminate, it just like loop thought. I mean, thought, emotion, thought, emotion, thought, emotion. It's like an endless loop. Whereas if you just stuck with that emotion and desensitized, like we talked about,
mhm,
eventually it's going to burn out without that loop continuing to go. But yeah, even in that way, the rumination serves as a distraction, as a defense from
mhm,
the actual feeling of sadness or whatever that you're avoiding. And what I've observed most of the time is it's a feeling that the mind is avoiding. It's never usually like a thought, even though it can be. We know that our brain can protect us from thoughts that are deemed too scary or not appropriate or whatever, but even in emotion as well. So yeah, you know your stuff for sure. I can tell based on what you're talking
you
about.
too.
Because this is extremely nuanced, what we're getting at. But the good thing is that I think outside of theory, the treatments are getting to a point now where it works, right? Regardless of what is behind the TMS.
Mhm,
If you stick to just the principles that we have, it's gonna work for you regardless of whether you're just caused by either like we said, you're ruminating on just one thing
mm,
um or you're repressing.
mhm,
If you stick to the principles, you generally stop repressing and you'll also stop catastrophizing, ruminating, things like that. And you'll get out of fight or flight. Um, I do want to move on. If you don't have any comments on that anymore, I do want to leave you with this question. So I was on a panel with Dr. Schubiner a while back, a Q&A panel, and I asked him, how much do you think we know about chronic pain? Uh, and how much do you think we need to learn
mm,
to get people better? And he was saying that, in his opinion, he thinks we know probably about 95% of what there is to know about this,
mm,
and we know enough to get people better.
mhm,
The rest of that is more about mechanisms, more about just getting down to like the absolute nitty gritty.
hmm.
What is your opinion on that? How much do you think we have to learn about this? And how much is that going to impact getting more people better?
That is such a good question. And I appreciate Dr. Schubner's response because I think what he's saying is that I think so often research can do this weird thing where we're like, now we're looking at it like this, now we're looking at it like this, now we're going to check this mechanism, then we're going to check this mechanism. And really, it's like we learned more about it, but it's not really helping people more what we've gathered. And so I think in terms of the mechanisms that are going on, I do think we still have a lot to learn. And I think we have a lot to learn about what we were saying before. Like it works for some people and it doesn't work for others. And it is, some people are receptive, some aren't. And those are all things that we want to understand because I think he's right. We have the tools now to make most people get better, but we're still trying to understand why some people don't. And I think that's a really important thing for us to try to figure out. So I don't think I could put a percentage on it, but that's one thing I've been reflecting on lately is I really want to make the treatment something that most people would be receptive to and not just like if that most people if they
Yeah,
heard it they would think
and
like wow yes and I don't know what that's going to take.
yeah, and you know that I would say of all of anything to research, that's a huge one because I mean I thought that when I found out this information that I was gonna tell people with back pain and they were gonna be open to it like I was. And dude, 90% of people are not. And then even like within the about the 10% that are open to it, most people won't do anything about it. And most people won't do anything about their pain until it's like absolutely debilitating them.
Yeah.
Which is a whole other thing. Like, why are people not receptive to trying this out when their pain is not severe? That is a like an observation that really has surprised me. Have you noticed the same?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think part of the problem is that physicians are like, will try everything and will rule out everything. And then if it's, and then if it's not this, then maybe it's a mind body disorder. And I think it would be better to present
Mm,
to patients like, we will in tandem, we will look at all these other things, but from the onset, this is most likely what it is. Like it's most likely mind body, and we're gonna check for the other things, not make it like the end of the list thing. But I just don't think there's that knowledge yet or reception among just like family medicine doctors or just
yeah.
physicians in general.
I mean, and Sarno talked about this. He said TMS is not a diagnosis of exclusion. It's a diagnosis. The same way that your doctor can look at something and say, this is it, that's TMS. There's very clear cut signs that
Hmm.
something is TMS and only TMS. And if we can train people to spot those, then I think doctors would be
Yeah.
more confident to diagnose people with TMS. And also understanding how much control the brain really has, which I think the research has done a great job of doing that. I think that's actually my favorite part of how research in the field has advanced is understanding how much control the brain really does have of the body and actually being able to prove that with technology through
Yeah.
brain scans and stuff like that, even seeing how people's brain structure changes through neuroplasticity and all that stuff is amazing. And it's proving how Sarno went from back pain, maybe causing other kinds of disorders, but then when you skip to the divided mind, um, he talks about the nerves, he talks about the immune system, he talks about so many more things
Mhm.
that are going to help to open doctors' minds up in the future about just how much control this really has. And me personally, I've had my mind affect just about every system in my body, the immune system, my vision, all that outside of just neurological pain. So I know as a fact that the brain truly controls and the autonomic nervous system control almost everything in our body.
It's true.
And if it wants to alter something just because it wants to, it can.
I know it's scary, isn't it? It's scary, but it's empowering.
It's scary and empowering. And for the people watching this that maybe got triggered by that statement, I like, and I tell this to clients, is that your brain and body also wants to live. So just because it can do something at the end, it's always trying to protect you, and it doesn't want to self-destruct. As an entity, your mind body only wants to survive. So
True.
that should make you feel better if you're worried. If that scares you, that your brain can do just about anything.
And that's
Um,
the thing too, is that I want people to know is just the agency. I think sometimes we can feel like our body is like a lot of people that suffer with these symptoms feel that their body is attacking them. Like, why is my body betraying me? I've tried
mm,
everything for you. I've tried different diets, different vitamin supplements. I've going to PT. I'm getting massage. Why are you doing this to me? And I think it can be so empowering to realize like me and my body are one, and my body's just trying to communicate with me that I'm not paying attention to my heart and
absolutely.
how important and how freeing that can be. So
Yes, very frank. Yeah, and I think you're going to be a great practitioner once if you do decide to get into the field.
you,
You're
Joseph.
gonna you're welcome. Like you're gonna be amazing. You understand this for sure. What were you thinking about doing that as like a psych major or as an MD?
Well, right now I'm getting my doctorate, so I'd have my PhD once I'm done. So I would hope to be a doctor of psychology.
Okay, the
Hopefully
doctor of psych.
work with some physicians and try to create like a mind body clinic.
That's great. I have my own plans of doing that. How it's gonna happen, I don't know, but I'll work that out. But we
I
need
have
we
no
need that.
doubt that you will get there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we need that. This was fantastic. Like I feel like as it is with like everybody in this field, like I feel like I can talk with you for hours.
Right.
Uh,
Same.
there's just so much to go into it. This stuff is so deep. It gets nuanced. Um, I want to I'll close out with the final thought that I had, and then if you have anything to add, you can do so. I do on the whole topic of research and everything. I do want people to know that are watching this that I am with Dr. Schubiner as far as saying we know enough to get you better. There are I do believe if you're watching this and you've tried TMS for a while and it's not working out for you, I do believe there are reasons for that, and I do believe that we already know those reasons. Um, that's why working with a practitioner is really good because they have seen so many patients. They start to recognize patterns, common things that trip people up in their own recovery. So I do think that we know enough for you to get better. And don't give up. Don't think that you have to wait for more research to come out for you to get better. That's one thing that I really want to drive home. I do think we know enough. So that's my last comment. Marjorie, do you have any last comments on that or any of your own?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that for so many people, there's a way out of pain. And like you said, we have the tools and we can be really brave and approach some of these internal emotions. And our bodies will thank us for it. And I just also want to say, Joseph, thank you so much for hosting me. This was a delight. It's so great to spend time with people that also are passionate about this work. It reinvigorates me and excites me, and I really am sure we'll be in touch as this circle grows.
Absolutely, Marjorie. Keep in touch. Thanks for coming on and have a great day.